KFTV Channel 3, Louisville. All right, good morning. It's Thursday, July 28th. I'm Ryan Halloran. Good morning.
I'm Hugh Finn.
That's a deal. What are headlines, please?
In the headlines, the House of Representatives in Washington plans a vote later on today to cut off money for covert CIA operations in Central America. New Albany, Indiana is without any taxi cab service this morning because of a dispute with City Hall. And we'll show you a success story which takes you from New Albany all the way to Las Vegas. $250,000 popping out of the slot machines. Right now, though, the forecast, and we're expecting some more hot weather. Hot and humid today. There may be some isolated thunderstorms around this afternoon, but don't count on any for your community. The high temperature today, 94. Tonight will be clear and warm with the lows 75. And tomorrow, hot and humid. And again, those isolated thunderstorms will pop up wherever they want to, not where we want them to. And the high tomorrow, 96 degrees. And I don't have the report in from Stanford Field just yet.
You want to go for 72?
I was going to say 72,
yeah,
so we're in agreement there. We must be wrong.
That's the only time we'll be in agreement because we don't have time to be friendly this morning.
Oh, okay, fella.
After Hugh updates the news and the weather, Rodney Ford will say it's great to have the governor back. Jack Connor has an interview with some farm people over in southern Indiana on the half hour. Hugh updates the news and the weather. And then I have an interview with Tom Howard, assistant to the president of the of the Tobacco Institute, on a recent government and smoking study. It was taken last September, and it cost $115 million, took 10 years, involved 12,000 men, and two surprising things. It did not show that reducing smoking reduces the risk of death from heart disease, and the second surprising thing is, according to the Tobacco Institute, nobody has published it, except for the government. And our guest on Today in Wave Country this morning is Mr. Tom Howard, and he is a spokesman for the Tobacco Institute. As a matter of fact, Tom is the assistant to the president of the Tobacco Institute. Good morning.
Good morning.
What attracted me, yes, thank you, was that the letter I got from you said that last September the government published a $115 million 10-year study of 12,000 men, which didn't show that reducing smoking reduces the risk of death from heart disease. Who did this study?
Well, it was a study performed and funded by the government, in other words, the taxpayers, $115 of taxpayer money, and we're sort of fascinated by the end results of this study. It is the largest heart disease study ever done anywhere in the world. Most extensive, 10 years of work, most expensive, $115 million. And like some other smaller studies that have come out in the past, the fascinating thing about it is that it didn't show the usual kinds of statistics we're used to hearing about smoking, and so it's gotten almost no publicity. And what we are thinking is that the public deserves to hear about both sides. This study doesn't by any means mean that smoking is safe, but it does show that there's some important things about chronic disease. Heart disease is the biggest killer that we simply don't understand.
We will examine the test itself. Why do you think it has not been publicized?
Well, it came out originally in this journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And I think what happened is that if it had shown the kinds of statistics that were expected, it would have gotten into the usual anti-smoking publicity mill, and we would have been hearing about it for months. It even has a sort of catchy name, if we can show the audience.
Let's see what it did, what it did say.
It's called the Multiple Risk Factor Intervention Trial. So it's often called the Mr. Fit study. What it happened was with 12,000 American men who were supposedly at high risk for heart disease. 10 years ago, they divided them into two groups. They called the first group a special intervention group, and then the second group was just usual care. The effort was to get this special intervention group to reduce their smoking, their cholesterol, and their blood pressure. And they were very successful.
Now, how were these people selected?
They were selected on the basis of the fact that they had particularly high rates of smoking and cholesterol and blood pressure.
Okay.
They were expected to be at high risk for heart disease. Well, over the years of the study, the first group compared to the second group did much better in reducing its so-called risk factors. In smoking, they reduced much more than was originally expected that they'd reduce.
Now, this 101% is not them quitting or reducing smoking. It is as compared with those who did
That's
not.
right. They reduced their smoking at a rate 100% higher than the first group, and they reduced their cholesterol significantly. They even reduced their blood pressure significantly. You would expect then that if our theories about heart disease are right, that this first group, the group in red, would have a much better rate of survival at the end of the 10-year period. Well, the end result was they published the death rates, and it showed that that first group had almost exactly the same mortality rate as the second group that wasn't doing nearly as well in reducing things like smoking. In fact, the first group had a slightly higher death rate. The fascinating thing about this study is why we're not talking about it in public, why the public isn't hearing about it. And I think it's unfortunate that we get so wrapped up emotionally sometimes, Ryan, in attacking smoking, that we don't allow ourselves to see that there really are some pretty important questions we don't have answers to.
But this is heart disease. You still get cancer from smoking. You're still injurious to emphysema. It's like saying...
Well, one of the fascinating things with this study is that none of the mortality rate differences were statistically significant. They were all about the same. But the first group, the group that reduced its smoking much more, had a slightly higher cancer rate, including lung cancer.
But they'd been smoking perhaps many years before, so does that prove?
That might have been a factor, but we also know that a series of recent government studies, which again haven't gotten too much publicity, show that lung cancer among non-smokers is on the increase. And government researchers are saying that there are several factors involved in lung cancer that are completely apart from tobacco that we don't understand. Now again, the Tobacco Institute obviously has a special interest in studies about tobacco. The Tobacco Institute is funded by cigarette manufacturers. Here in the state of Kentucky, there's some 82,000 jobs that are derived from tobacco. But I think all of us have a right to hear about all sides of the information.
Does this study indicate that we don't know much about tobacco or that we don't know much about heart?
I think what the study indicates is that some of our theories that we've held so close to our heart about what causes chronic disease have some major gaps in them, and that things are not nearly as simple as we've been led to believe.
Has there been a reaction to this from the medical community?
For the most part, no. It just hasn't gotten much publicity. Even most doctors are not familiar with this study. What we are hoping is that at the end of this year, when the Surgeon General's report comes out, that the media will begin to ask some tough questions about some of the typical theories. Again, we are not saying that smoking's safe, but that we do have to pay attention to some of the other factors that aren't getting consideration.
To someone who wants to ask more questions of you or to challenge you, how do we get in touch with you, Tom?
Well, what we'd like to do, Ryan, is invite anybody who has any questions about this study or would like to see actual copies of it or anything else that we have to offer to write the Tobacco Institute in Washington. I think we've got the address up on the screen. One of the things that happens, again, because people get so involved in attacking tobacco, is that sometimes I think some sort of extreme statements are made. And what I would like to see the public start doing is to ask for documentation. That's why we always give out our address, and we always say, please do write us and let us give you more information.
Tom, again, what's the name of the study?
The Multiple Risk Factor Intervention Trial, published several months ago in the Journal of the American Medical Association.
Tom Howard, a spokesman for the Tobacco Institute, assistant to the president. Thank you.
Ryan, thank you very much. It's good to be here.